No pareciera que a MAGA Mike Johnson le guste lo que está pasando en el Capitolio con estas nuevas palabras de los sobrevivientes de Jeffrey Epstein. Ellos están exigiendo transparencia real dentro del Departamento de Justicia para que de una vez por todas se hagan públicos los archivos de Jeffrey Epstein, tal y cual Donald Trump prometió al principio de su campaña. Y Mike Johnson dice: yo no le veo el problema aquí porque hemos sido transparentes. Es más, les dimos 33.000 documentos del archivo de Jeffrey Epstein. Pero no lo hicieron, lo que hicieron es dar 33.000 documentos repetidos de archivos que en gran cantidad ni siquiera eran de Jeffrey Epstein. Pero aquí tienes a Mike Johnson, sin embargo. Mira el clip, por favor.
I've spoken to the president myself about this many times, and he is insistent as we are. He is the most transparent president in memory, probably in the history of the country. As you know, he stops. If he were here now, he would stand here and take your questions endlessly. That's his mindset, and he wants the American people to have information so they can draw their own conclusions. I've talked with him about this very subject myself, so I can tell you that is his heart. Now, he also, just as we do, is insistent that we protect the innocent victims, and that's what this has been about.
Ha sido por las víctimas, por supuesto, pero también hemos escuchado a Donald Trump hablar sobre este tema. Lo ha llamado una farsa, ha dicho que todo lo que relaciona a Jeffrey Epstein y a Ghislaine Maxwell es una farsa. Le dio inmunidad a Ghislaine Maxwell, que por si no la conoces, es la mano derecha de Jeffrey Epstein, y le dieron 20 años de cárcel por cometer crímenes atroces. Y Donald Trump, aparte de darle inmunidad, le permitió que la traspase a una cárcel de mínima seguridad que básicamente es un resort. Hemos escuchado a Donald Trump decir que la gente, cualquier republicano o cualquier demócrata que firme el tratado de descargo para hacer públicos estos archivos, él lo verá como un ataque hostil contra la administración de Donald Trump. De todos modos, esto es lo que están diciendo las víctimas de Jeffrey Epstein. Préstale mucha atención.
So can I get a show of hands? Who here is satisfied with the level of contact they've had from Congress? Nobody. Let me ask this. How about the Justice Department? I want to ask a couple of things about what you knew about things that were happening with this case that you're obviously involved with. Show of hands. Did any of you hear from the Justice Department before they released that memo, that 2-page memo earlier this summer? No hands. Were any of you told that Todd Blanch would be speaking with Ghislaine Maxwell prior to that interview over the course of 2 days?
No.
No. Were any of you told about the prison transfer that Ghislaine Maxwell?
No.
Do any of you feel that the DOJ has communicated with you enough this year?
No.
Have any of you had any communication with the DOJ?
No.
Nobody in this room has heard at all from the Department of Justice?
No.
Is that surprising to you?
No. It should be. It should, yeah.
A continuación quiero que veas lo que tiene que decir el ex senador de los Estados Unidos, Don Jones. Cole habló de temas de relevancia mediática como el actuar del Departamento de Justicia en torno al caso de Jeffrey Epstein, y también tocó el tema de las víctimas de Jeffrey Epstein y Ghislaine Maxwell. Mira, por favor.
Senator, you heard what they were saying there. Explain how baffling it is, based on everything you know about the DOJ, that they would not be contacted, or just in general how the DOJ has been handling this.
You know, it's amazing to me that they haven't been contacted. I mean, look, there's a statute dealing with victims' rights and victim, whether it is for a pre-sentence report or whether it is just for restitution or victims' notice requirements. There's a statute. There's a law on the books that DOJ is supposed to be following. And it's stunning to me that they have just shoved that aside. I say stunning. It should not be surprising to anyone that they would shove aside the victims of this case, the women who were victimized by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, in order to try to figure out the political ramifications of a very sensitive thing for the President of the United States. At this stage of the game, that should not be surprising, but it's certainly not consistent with the law. It's not consistent with DOJ practices. And I think that we're beginning to see that snowball beginning to build right now in Congress and the American people. And today is a big day. Today is the first day you've really heard en masse from those victims. And that's going to get the public's attention.
An opportunity to read or hear about Todd Blanch's conversation or interviews transcribed with Ghislaine Maxwell in Tallahassee. Then she was given a use immunity there, and then thereafter moved to a minimum security facility where she had to get a special waiver for, because they don't allow convicted sex traffickers in these minimum security facilities. It's also right on the Texas A&M campus, Camp Ryan. They do a lot of activities together. So bring a sex trafficker, underage girls, to a place where they raise puppies together and things like that seems to be a pretty poor idea. And then you've seen the Bill Barr interview that was done, or deposition that was done on the Hill. You flagged before, I think, just the way these questions are being asked, and it's obvious to you the leading questions and the very nature of this is also very manufactured. But could you describe what you've been seeing?
There's no question about that. I mean, first of all, you got to remember, I don't think that Todd Blanch went to do that interview as the Deputy Attorney General. He was there as Donald Trump's personal lawyer. There is little doubt about that. This was about the President of the United States and also trying to get information that would feed Trump's old conspiracy theory about protecting others, protecting the rich and powerful Democrats or something like that. It is the most worthless interview I think DOJ has ever conducted in its history. She has no credibility. She is a convicted sex offender. To even waste the time going up there, because you knew what she was going to say. You could have written that script ahead of time. And what I've seen, not only with DOJ, but also on the Hill with Congressman Comer and others, you set these things up with leading questions. These are not open-ended questions. What happened next? Where did they go? What did you see? This was just basically, did you see anything inappropriate? No. Did the President of the United States do anything that you saw inappropriate? No. I mean, it was a setup from the very beginning. That is worthless to the American public. It is worthless to the criminal justice system, Blanche's interview. The only thing it was worth something to her in order to get moved to a less secure prison. I mean, much less secure prison, a camp, and potentially be there for either clemency or a pardon. One of the two is what she's banking on. And she got a get out of jail free card. They call it a queen for a day letter, that she could say anything that she wanted and nothing was going to be used against her. So it's really pretty disgusting the way the DOJ has been handling this.
And I think you could then say it's disgusting the way the DOJ has been handling this, and then fill in the blank on any number of on every single issue, from I think something you've referred to as monopoly justice, of a real just blatant pay for play DOJ of who they go after. Is Pam Bondi's brother representing you? Have you donated money to the Trump administration? And it's just very obvious. I got to ask you, because I do a show with Harry Littman, who is former Maine Justice, a top prosecutor there, and he's like in horror of what he's seeing. I got to ask you, as the United States Attorney in the Clinton administration, Northern District of Alabama, as United States Senator. I mean, the DOJ being a Fed is kind of a federal prosecutor is in your veins. So what do you make of, like, when you see this? Like, what do you think about it?
First of all, it's really sad for those of us who have been in DOJ and have worked there and have revered that organization. I mean, we really have, even in times when it was an administration that I disagreed with on any number of policy issues. That's happened over the years. I mean, I've been around for a long time doing this stuff. But you still have this certain affinity, because you knew at the end of the day, there were people there that believed in the fair administration of justice. You might not always agree with their tactics. You might not always agree with their priorities. But at the end of the day, you knew that justice was somewhat safe and they were representing the American public. That is out the window. You may as well take the word justice off of the Department of Justice building, the Robert F. Kennedy building in Washington, D.C., and make it the Department of Presidential Prerogatives, presidential transactions, whatever you want to do. This Department of Justice is solely representing the President of the United States, and they make really no bones about that. They talk about that. Pam Bondi consistently says doing things consistent with what the President of the United States wants. And so it's really a sad day. It was interesting you called. I mean, we're doing this today. Just on Monday, I had a call with some of my former colleagues in the Clinton administration. We call ourselves the Clintonistas. And to a person, everybody is distraught. Everybody is sad at what's going on. And there's nobody really rising up. You don't see the folks in Congress, Republicans who have been law and order, have been supportive of law enforcement. You don't see anyone standing up and speaking out. And I'll tell you one other thing to watch out for, and this is a little bit frightening too. You can criticize the FBI all you want to, but for the last 50, 60, 70 years, they have been one of the greatest law enforcement agencies in the world. I disagree with them on a number of things. We've gone toe to toe when I was a defense lawyer on a lot of things. But the fact is, for national security, for domestic security, for investigating big white collar crimes, for investigating drug cartels, those kind of things, FBI has done a hell of a job, and they are getting decimated at this point. They are going to lower the standards for FBI agents to come in. And that is just going to put people on the streets in the federal law enforcement that have no business being there.
You know, the head of the domestic counterterrorism unit is a guy named Thomas Fugate III, who's a 22-year-old intern from Trump, who before that, I think did, either some gardening for Trump they brought in the intern and they made the intern the head of the counter domestic terrorism, and making us, it is shocking. I mean, but, and I guess, I'm a law professor at USC. And of course I would always recommend the path before of working at the DOJ, would be an obvious path. And also I'd recommend working at some of these big law firms, and I would tell them, here's a great path. Here's a great path. But we see big firms capitulating. We see the DOJ behaving. What should I tell young law students right now in this environment? Like, what would you tell someone who's coming up? Like, where do they go? Where does the old me work right now?
I tell them, just jump on the boat and hang on, because you're going to have a rough ride for a while, and you really cannot. I don't think I can recommend to a rising professional, someone with ethics and standards, that they should go to the FBI or that they should go into DOJ. Now, I will say this candidly, across this country, and U.S. attorneys' offices across the country, there are folks there that have been there, that are working there, that are toiling in the vineyards, and they're just keeping their heads down, and they're trying to do their jobs, and they are doing that. They're doing the same things U.S. attorneys' offices do. The issue I think we've got to watch out for is whether or not that how the things that are going on at the top are going to continue to filter down. How many people are going to be put to just simply doing the crazy ice work that they've got going on right now? I think you're going to lose really quality candidates who will want to go to the Department of Justice and be there for a period of time, if not for their careers. We're going to lose that in this administration. We're going to lose that. And the thing that folks aren't, I don't think, talking about enough, all of this is going to be hard to fix. This is not going to be something that the midterms or even the 28 election can fix overnight. This is the dismantling of a department that I think is going to take a long time to build back up and to gain the credibility with the American public that it so richly deserves.
Finally, Voting Rights Act, voting rights issues near and dear to your heart, clearly under assault. You have what's taking place in Texas, gerrymandering at what's going to be taking place, I guess, a special session in Missouri. Donald Trump went from find me 11,000, whatever, 400, whatever the votes were, to find me these seats. Right. And Republican governors are saying, will do. Now, Democratic governors, I see like Newsom stepping up and saying, we don't want to do this here. We like the independent commission, but if you do it, we're going to have to do it. We're not going to throw away our democracy. What do you make of everything kind of the assault of the Voting Rights Act? And I get in the weeds with my audience on how the formula and the pre-clearance was destroyed and how that really was the precursor to what we're seeing now, where governors are in the first, or the legislatures are now creating the maps versus the pre-clearance requirement. But this was a generational, I think, move by right wing to destroy voting rights, but we're seeing the manifestations at the worst time. Where are we right now in all this?
Look, we're seeing the same manifestations of the decades-long chipping away the Voting Rights Act that we saw in the chipping away of Roe versus Wade to where it finally went away. We're seeing that with the Voting Rights Act. And there's two different things here. The Voting Rights Act is one. Let's talk about that in a minute. The other one you mentioned is gerrymandering. There are two things in this country that I think is the biggest problem in American politics today. Number one is gerrymandering. Both sides have been doing it. It is getting out of hand. It is starting a war. And that is coupled now with what I have seen as an adoption of Newton's third law of physics to politics. And that is, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And now we are in that with gerrymandering, and that cannot be good. It is, one, an insult to voters. Number two, it is voters can sometimes use it to just kind of get lazy and vote for whoever they want to, or either not vote, depending, knowing that their candidate is likely to win. This is a real problem. Democrats had an opportunity, and they let it slip away from them at the end of the 2020 election. They just let it slip away, and it's too bad. We could have had nonpartisan, drawing of districts across the board, and we just kind of let that slip away. But this gerrymandering war cannot be good. And at some point, I would hope that enough public officials and people in the public will line up and say, if only the citizens of this country would stand up and say, you know what? Don't take my damn vote for granted anymore. Okay? Just don't take it for granted. I want you to prove to me that you earned my vote. I don't care whether you're a Republican or Democrat. Talk to me. All politics is personal these days. And that's what I want you to do. The Voting Rights Act is in real trouble. I think Chief Justice Roberts has not been a friend of the Voting Rights Act forever. He and Brett Kavanaugh saved it the last time, but it's hanging by a thread. And if we lose the ability to protect minority voters in this country, which are growing across the country, then I think we're going to be in a real, I think that democracy is in great peril at that point. It has accomplished so much. And remember the time before now when it was reauthorized, it was almost unanimous in both houses of Congress. That's how people think. And that's unfortunately how the wheel has turned these days against minorities, against the Voting Rights Act, against trying to give free and fair access to the ballot box so that we can get the number of people voting up rather than keeping it artificially stagnated the way it is right now.
When during the semester, my class is about 105 students, and I say to them, I just say in a nonpartisan way, I say, raise your hand today, raise your hand if you think the Voting Rights Act could be passed in 2025. Just raise your hand. It was passed on a bipartisan basis 50 years ago, 60. Do you think it could be passed today? Not a single hand. And I said, just think about that. In 2025, 105 students don't think we could pass the voting rights. Then I go through everything else. I go to, Civil Rights Act. I go to Title IX. No one raises their hands. Says, we couldn't pass this legislation today. And I'm like, what do you think of me? So when people say that you have less rights than your grandparents did, you're all basically, saying that right now. Before we go, Senator, anything else, though, that's on your mind? We got 6 million subscribers. It's the most watched YouTube channel right now. Our audience loves to hear from you. I joked with you before we went on that in the early days of the Midas YouTube channel, I would just take the Doug Jones kind of rants that you would do in that office, and I would say, Doug, tell me what you're thinking. So before we go, anything else you want to get out there just to our audience?
You know, I want to be very conscious of, and I know a lot of your listeners and viewers are, but I want people to be very conscious of all of this that's going on with the National Guard in these cities. You know, this is not just a mere distraction, folks. This is much more serious. We may see this at election time in key precincts, in key congressional districts around the country. This is not just a distraction from the Epstein stuff that's going on right now, and which is dominating the news. This is a power play like we've not seen. And these guys, remember that the National Guard is not trained to do law enforcement. That is just a ruse. They're not trained to do this law enforcement. In fact, they are not doing law enforcement work up there. They're putting out mulch around the flowers and the shrubs in Washington, D.C. It's costing a fortune. I heard a member of Congress from Chicago today on the news talking about the fact that if you take all of the money that was spent in Los Angeles, you could hire 2,000 police officers in Chicago. But I want folks to understand too that crime is still a problem, even though it may be going down in these cities. It's still a problem. People are concerned, but there is a way to strategically attack crime. We've seen it before. We've done it before. The joint federal state law enforcement can really focus on the crimes and the activities and the individuals that cause those crimes without the kind of authoritarian show of force that we're seeing. I think it's ironic that as we're seeing the National Guard deployed against Americans, or deployed in American cities, we're seeing China and Russia and North Korea in a demonstration of their authoritarian power over in China right now. And I just hope people will at some point, I know there are a lot of folks that think, well, you know, something's need to be done in these cities. And I agree with that. But the National Guard and their tax dollars with those National Guard is not the way to do it. There's ways to help bring the crime problems down in these cities, but National Guard's not the way.
Y bueno amigos, llegamos al final del video, espero que les haya gustado, que les haya servido. Como siempre les digo, para mí lo más importante es tu opinión y me encantaría que la pongas en los comentarios. Además, si les gusta el contenido de política estadounidense, les gusta saber lo que está pasando día a día en Estados Unidos, les va a encantar suscribirse al canal ya que subo videos todos los días. Mi nombre es José Alvarado, soy economista y estoy comprometido a informarte diariamente. Nos vemos en el siguiente video. Adiós.